Welcome to the Women in STEM podcast. I'm your host, Kelly, and today we'll be discussing why diversity and inclusion will help mitigate the engineering shortage. And today I have a special co-host guest with me. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hey everybody, my name is Christine Spang and I'm the founder and CTO of a software startup called Nylas. I started the company in 2013 and it's grown to about 300 people today, so it's been a wild ride, and really psyched to have a conversation with Kelly here about improving the engineering shortage with diversity and inclusion.
Your career, like the title of your job, sounds so interesting. Would you be able to delve into your career path so far?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely been an interesting ride to get to where I am today. Going really far back, I basically got into sort of engineering in general because I was really good at math and science in school, and I kind of came from a family of engineers. Like my dad was an electrical engineer, my grandfather was a chemical engineer, and so kind of always had this sense growing up that I wanted to build things someday, but I didn't have like a good sense of like what that actually meant. And looking back, just the idea that I could say that I want to be an engineer when I grow up it's a very broad thing. It's like, do you want to build bridges, or do you want to, automate things to, reduce information labor, things like that. So that's a huge broad range of things. And I only really narrowed down to realizing that I really was excited and passionate about software when basically in high school, I got into programming through online gaming. And so I started essentially learning to code in high school, and then I helped contribute to this game that I was playing online, and that game only ran on Linux. So I kind of followed things down to learning about Linux, and I started contributing to this flavor of Linux called Debian. And then kind of the end game of all that was that I decided that I really wanted to go to MIT and study computer science. And that's what I ended up doing. And so at MIT, basically, I was introduced to entrepreneurship through kind of this like very nerdy obsession with programming and sort of open source Linux environments. So basically, I met some folks through the computer club at MIT who had started a company commercializing some technology that they had developed for their master's thesis. And so I actually ended up starting to work for them part-time when I was a senior at MIT, and ended up deciding not to go to grad school. That was kind of the default thing I was looking at, to go join that startup full-time. And so I learned all about startups through that kind of first path in my career. And after the founder sold that company to Oracle, and I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do next, I decided it was a good time in my life to do something that may or may not work out. And I ended up starting Nylas at that point. And, I'd be lying to say that I, knew that it would turn out the way that it had. And, 8 years later, I would be, running a pretty significantly sized company at this point. But it's been a super amazing journey, and I've learned a lot. And, started out just building the product here at Nylas, and then, I've gone through a lot of different phases. One of the great things about startups is that, your job changes all the time. It's not like you start a company and then you do the same thing for the next 4 years. I started out building the product, but, at that time we also had to do, literally everything. I had to get on the phone with potential customers and, pitch them the product and help them try to integrate and things like that. So I've done everything from, there was a couple points where I managed our entire engineering team, and I didn't have experience with that beforehand, so really had to learn things on the fly. And at this point, I've moved away from that, was able to hire in someone to focus on managing the engineering team. And today I do a bunch of different things, everything from doing a lot of speaking and sort of external facing events for the company, as well as I do a lot of work with our customers, and still am involved with a lot of the kind of internal technical roadmap and sort of how the platform is evolving. So there's kind of a lot of different things that I do, kind of juggling this like, technical role as well as just, when you're a founder of a company, like I feel like there's this portion of your brain that's like kind of always thinking about just like the entire company. So things like, is the culture evolving in ways that are positive, and that, is the company that I want to build as the company has grown. We've about tripled the size of the company in the last year and change. And, when you grow that quickly, a lot of things change. Some things you want to change and some things you want to preserve. And so there's a lot of thinking about like, what kind of leadership do we need to bring in? What are the big problems of the company? Like, what do we need to accomplish in the next, few quarters to, get to where we want to go and things like that. So it's a bit of like a lot of context switching between, like tactical, like this thing is a problem that we need to solve this week. And this is, what we're trying to work towards over the course of the next year or even multiple years. And it's pretty fun. I'm excited that things have turned out the way they have. And honestly, I'm really honored to be lucky enough to be in this position.
Yeah, wow. It sounds like your career has definitely rocketed off. And throughout your career, I mean, it sounds like you've had quite a interesting journey, but have you felt like you've received any backlash or received any resistance because of diversity and inclusion with regards to you, wanting to start your own co-found?
I feel like for me, it's been largely a positive thing. I mean, one challenge as a startup is that you want to stand out and be seen. And so for me, being a female in tech, and especially kind of wearing that CTO hat at the company, it's been a way to stand out and to be seen as unique and interesting. So I feel like it's helped me spread kind of the word of the company and just be memorable, because people remember things that are different more than they remember things that are the same. That's not to say that there haven't been any challenges. I definitely find that just getting to a point where I feel like I belong in terms of just being a part of the entrepreneurship community, it took quite a while. And I feel really lucky that I had a lot of great sort of male allies and mentors at the startup that I joined out of college, and no one ever told me that like you can't do this because of who you are. I feel like I've surrounded myself with folks that have been very supportive. So I know some people have run into like really sexist experiences in terms of like raising money or things like that, but for me, it's generally been quite positive. And I know there's a lot of work to do for the industry, but it's so rewarding that I want to help other people get into this and succeed, and bring things to the world that the world needs. So that's kind of my point of view on that.
Great. And for our listeners, some of them may have heard of diversity inclusion. For some of them, it might be their first time and not really understanding what it means. Would you be able to explain what you mean by diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, for sure. Some folks today expand that to say diversity, inclusion, and equity. But I mean, the big picture is being actively welcoming and seeking out people that bring new perspectives, new backgrounds, whether that's race or gender or, socioeconomic background growing up, things like that. The general idea is that there's, majority groups out there who hold a lot of the power and sort of decision-making abilities, as well as, just have more influence in the world. And in a company, that might be things like leadership or just, the general makeup of a company. And so focusing on diversity and inclusion means, actively trying to bring people from different backgrounds into your company, making sure that in order to succeed in an organization, you don't have to look or be a certain way. So I think there's a big part of it that's kind of this softer thing about just expecting there to be differences, and so losing assumptions about where someone's coming from. I think working on diversity, inclusion, and equity means that you will have to do more communication work, because if a company is made up of just a group of people that all went to the same college, they hung out all the time, that kind of thing, like, you have this set of shared assumptions that you can just work off of, and you don't have to necessarily have explicit conversations about, what are the expectations, what's okay, what's not okay, what do you need to do to succeed. People have this implicit understanding of what all those things are, but if you really care about diversity and inclusion, you need to be more explicit about those kinds of things, because you don't have that shared background. So for us, it's really meant, making sure to go out and look for people to join the company from, groups that we don't have represented in the company, and then also holding ourselves accountable to advancement and, having different folks in leadership.
And this was actually a topic that you came up with, and I found it very interesting that you referred to the shortage of engineers. So why do you think there's a current shortage, and what has been your experience with that so far?
Yeah, for sure. Over the past number of decades, the pervasiveness of software in terms of all of the things that are enabled by it has really continued to grow at a very fast pace. And, what that has meant is that, many different companies, more so ever today than in the past, are trying to hire engineering teams so they can build out software, so they can automate workflows within the company, so that, like a lot of different companies that didn't used to need to have, an app for your phone, things like that, now need to have that today. And so, I think it's two things. One, the demand for software engineering talent has really increased. And then, especially in the last couple of years with the coronavirus pandemic, that trend is only accelerated. Probably, 10 years worth of change happened in the last 2 years, and that put even a quite a bit more pressure on those talent markets. I see it, running the company in that, salaries have increased in kind of the software engineering field in a way that's, outpaced just the broader kind of employment market. And it's very competitive. There's a lot of leverage that employees have in terms of, being able to find a place that, they really want to work, and employers have to sell those candidates to bring them into their companies. So kind of just big summary of that is that, software engineering is a very competitive market today. The big sort of levers are in the employees' hands, and, companies that want to retain and employ the top talent out there need to put in a lot of work in order to get those folks to come to their companies. So the flip side of that is that we need to get more people in the software engineering field, and I really believe that one of the ways in which that we can do that is by diversifying the field. It's still the case today that software engineering overall is, for example, only about 20% women. And that, that's varied a bit throughout the decades, but, imagine if there were 50% women in software engineering, that would, help a lot, given that, we're still in an environment where demand is outpacing supply for software engineering talent. And, one way that, for example, Nylas has worked on this in the past is that, we put together a program to bring in folks from boot camp programs into a support engineering position. And then we trained them and helped them get full-time engineering positions within the company. And I think that there's going to be, more of a resurgence of programs like that to help bring in that kind of talent and get them into a point where they are, in full-time engineering jobs within the industry.
I think that's a great answer. I think you've definitely highlighted some aspects that some people might have not thought about. And I wanted to find out from like your experience from being a co-founder and even prior to that, what has been some of the most common mistakes you've seen women in STEM making with regards to their career?
Yeah, I'm not sure there's like any sort of one thing that I would say is just like a top mistake, but overall, I think, one kind of like unfortunate bias that I see women having to overcome is this perception that they're quote unquote not technical enough. Because, and I think this is really unfortunate because women tend to be better at a lot of the other skills that are really important in engineering, like, really great communication, having empathy, being able to, work together with groups. And so having an advantage of that can sort of lead people to feel like they're pushed into positions where they can really lean on those skills a lot. And I think it's really important to make sure that folks have a really solid foundation in building before, for example, going into like management or a tech lead position or product management or any sort of kind of fields that can really make use of that engineering background. But if you make that switch too soon, it can kind of come back to bite you later down along the lines, because without enough of a foundation in that building, it can be hard to make a lot of impact later, just because you don't have the versatility in terms of understanding things like architecture and being able to use that to have credibility in those other positions. So I would say that's really important to get to like a senior engineering level before really kind of exploring switching into, a position that makes use of that technical background without being hands-on building all the time.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I did a presentation recently with regards to women in STEM and kind of talking about how there has been an increase in promoting women to go into STEM. However, retaining women in the technical fields can be often hard because other industries like business, finance industries, they love to, hire engineers and stuff, and then
Yeah.
kind of take them off course.
Yeah, and it's great that, engineering and software engineering can be this springboard into all sorts of different career paths, because because software is becoming so important in the modern world, it's really useful to have that foundation and that background in all of those different positions. And I think you also see a lot more like even CEOs of companies having come from engineering versus a long time ago is more of a business focus. But yeah, the main takeaway is just like, don't do it too soon, because you'll be much more effective later on if you get to a level where you can architect systems and be really independent in the building role, and then go take that and make it your superpower in terms of product management or being an engineering manager, director, things like that. Just don't go adjacent too soon.
Yeah, definitely. And with regards to diversity and inclusion, do you have any advice as to how other companies that might also wanting to make that leap can go about doing that in a way that will not only benefit them, but also benefit the person as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie here, it's hard. So don't expect it to be just sort of an easy thing of like, okay, we're going to do D&I now, and it's going to be super fast and easy to transform the company to really embrace that. I think it really starts with values first. and making it clear that diversity and inclusion is something that is really important and valuable at your organization. You can even be open about the fact that it's a learning journey, and you want to iterate and improve over time, and nobody knows everything to get started. And if this were a solved problem, we wouldn't be talking about it today. Like, people would just be doing it and not worrying about it. But I think it starts with recognizing that this is important value, and then the second part is quite comprehensive in terms of it. It needs to be something that's included in all sorts of different parts of the organization and the processes, and evaluated and incentivized at your organization. So everything from looking at like how you're hiring, like are you looking at like a diverse candidate pipeline for the roles that you're trying to fill? Like, that's step one. If you're not bringing in diverse candidates to a company, then you're not going to retain them if you don't even hire them in the first place. And then like a second piece is things like manager training. A lot of organizations don't train managers at all in any way. They just kind of like throw you into the fire and are like, well, you have people reporting to you now, and good luck. But in order to be really effective as a manager, that's an entirely different skill set from what most people are doing before they have a management job. And so imagine that you're doing really well at building software, and then your job is to enable a team to accomplish more than you could on your own. That's a whole bunch of people skills that you weren't necessarily using or developing in just like being really good at writing code. So I think having manager training is something that's really important, whether that's internal or external to your organization. There's lots of people out there that run training programs you can send people to. So even if you're not to a size where you can hire someone to internally run training programs. In the beginning, we just sent people to external programs to help them get up to speed and build those people skills. And then, third piece is just communication. Like I mentioned earlier, you have to get to a point where you're making fewer assumptions about people and asking more questions, and then being really explicit about what are expectations, and also helping make people feel comfortable and seen. So it's even more important in the beginning when you may be hiring people who don't look like the people that are already at your company. You have to be explicitly welcoming, and I think it's really important to try to bridge that gap and do some of that emotional labor of realizing that people may be going through things that you don't even know about, and trying to say like you don't have to talk about these things at work, but if you need an ear or like you're struggling or whatever, like me as your manager is available and happy to do my best to be supportive, things like that. So there's a lot of different pieces of it, and I think it's more of a journey than any one thing that you check the box. Like, even if you're a big company and go out and hire someone to be in charge of DEI at your company, if you don't have buy-in and the ability to especially like support from the very top, from the CEO, and ability to influence internal process, then we're probably not going to make progress about it over time.
Yeah. And looking at it from the flip side, do you have any advice for any employees or any students who might be in an environment where they feel like they're not being represented, and they might want to feel like they want to voice their opinion but are a bit too shy to do that? Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different parts of this. One is that I think in general, it's really important to come at these things from a perspective of, again, not assuming any sort of like what the intent is on the other side of what's happening. So having curiosity, and there's a lot of people that say like assume good intent or assume positive intent, and I don't think that's quite right. I think the most important thing is to not assume specific intent. Like a lot of things just happen because of like a confluence of random things and people being busy, organizational priorities, things like that. And the most constructive way to affect change is to just assume there wasn't any specific intent, ask questions, and share your needs. I would start out by having conversations with your manager about like how do you advance within this company? Like, what do I need to do to make a bigger impact, and making it clear that you do want to advance in your career, and sharing like what that looks like to you. Like, is it important to you to get praised in public? Do you how do you align about like what timeline it might take to get to the next level? What are the things that are rewarded and valued at your organization? So it starts with communication first, and you taking control of your career and being clear about what you're looking for. And you may get different responses to that from your manager. In the best position, like your manager will be supportive and will do their best to try to help you. But you also get more information if that's not the case. Like maybe your manager is not paying that much attention, or in the worst possible situation, if they're downright not supportive, then that, well, maybe it's time to look for like a lateral move within your organization, or even look at potentially moving organizations. And if you don't initiate those conversations, you just don't have information about whether this is going to be a place that's worth your while to invest. But assuming that you do get a positive response, there's no downside to that. It's a win-win situation. It might be uncomfortable, but you're going to win either way, in that you'll either know that what you need to do here to succeed, or that you should be looking somewhere else. It's really helpful to be constructive in terms of suggestions. And I don't mean to say that like you should like take on a whole nother job, but advocating for specific things, like even things like, having your organization sponsor start like an ERG for people from a specific background. Like, for example, we have like a gender minorities ERG, a parents ERG, people of color ERG, things like that. And that's one way to form community within people of specific groups within a broader organization, and provide support. And just being constructive about what sort of things you're looking for from leadership is super helpful, because again, people are really busy. There's a lot of pressures running a company, and it's a lot easier to help someone out if they're asking for something specific than if they're just sort of venting about a problem.
Right. And I'm sure that there's going to be some other listeners listening who are very interested in your career path and might even want to follow in similar footsteps. So do you have any career advice that you've received that stood out for you? Any tips that really helped shape your career?
Yeah, this is like maybe a little bit non-standard perhaps, but when I was at the first startup that I was at, the CEO there gave a lot of advice about like being really smart about what you do with your money, actually. So I started investing when I was 22, just in the public markets using index funds. And that's something that has been really helpful for me, in that, growth in terms of invested money, especially if you start pretty early on, that pays back in a huge way later on. So it's a really good habit to get started in. And I think just having like the security of, building towards financial independence is really helpful for confidence. And that, is like a naturally sort of compounding thing in that, confidence will help you get bigger positions, and just, build a reputation amongst other people for being someone who gets stuff done. So there's lots of things, in terms of just like your life in general, that like being a person who, feels like they're, independent and have resources, can just be helpful to your psyche, and that will accelerate your career as well.
I love that advice. Yeah, it wasn't what I was expecting, but that's great advice. That's definitely invest, ladies. If you're listening, definitely look into it. I think that is definitely something that's life-changing and can be able to give you that freedom that you can need, and also give you the confidence when you feel like you might need to make certain decisions. And with regards to also like your career, was there any particular resources that have helped you? Any particular resources that you would recommend to other people? Any books, podcasts, or websites that you came across?
Yeah, for sure. I think the one that I'd like to mention here is, when I started, basically when I started managing at Nylas, I had no idea what I was doing. And I was also, I think I was 24, 25 at the time. And so I didn't really have a lot of immediate peers who were in a position at that point, because it was too early. So I had like one friend who was, a bit older than me, who I knew had done management before. And I was like, hey, help. Is there any like books I should read, or like, what should I do? And he recommended me this book called Becoming a Technical Leader by this guy, Jerry Weinberg, which was really impactful for me early on. And it's just about kind of the sort of mindset shift of going from, a really effective individual contributor to being someone who is a leader, whether that's even just being someone who's an advanced and senior individual contributor, or someone who's sort of looking at management, and kind of all of the sort of people skills that, and just shifting yourself internally to take that on. So that was a big impact for me. And unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. He used to run this training course as well. But his business partner still runs the training course. Her name is Esther Derby. And I don't remember what it's called these days, but her sort of week-long workshop for leadership is super good. And it's one of those things that, like, maybe there's not like a specific tactical thing that you like immediately go back home and do right away, but like the internal shifts that it sort of sets the snowball going, I found to be really impactful for me in terms of like building my confidence as a leader. And that's been super important for me, because I'm not gonna lie here. I didn't see myself as someone who like should be in this position. And it's been a long journey for me to be okay with myself in this position, and to feel like, I'm someone who is a leader, and who should be a leader, and who can be a good leader, because I don't look like the people who are sort of historically, held up as examples of leaders.
Yeah, that's definitely some great resources. I even wrote it down as well, so I'll definitely be looking into that. And I know in particular, like with engineers, we tend to get told that a lot of engineers don't have very good soft skills, like, dealing in the workplace, dealing with other people. Do you have any tips with regards to that, about improving your soft skills?
It's all learnable, and don't let anybody else tell you that it's not learnable. It's just another skill that you got to build up and practice and work on, just like, writing code or doing data analysis or any other thing that you work on. For example, I probably the first time I ever did public speaking was when I was, I don't know, in my early 20s, and I was really bad at it. And you're just going to be really bad at it for a while. It's okay. But it is something that you can practice and learn and get better at, and you get more comfortable at. There's also like communication skills and even just like reading other people. It's very learnable, and so the important thing is to decide to get better at it. And then there's tons of resources out there, from books to online courses. If you're in a position to get like a coach, that's also something that's really valuable for that kind of thing. And so there's plenty of ways to go about improving on those skills. If you set your mind to it and decide that it's something that is really important for you to get better at.
Yes, I agree as well. I've been trying to improve my soft skills. So I've been joining like Toastmasters, doing more public speaking, putting myself out there sometimes, in things where I might feel like, oh no, I shouldn't be doing this. But I feel like you get better as you go along. And I definitely encourage people to also look into improving their soft skills as well as their technical. They tend to come hand in hand, especially when working in the workplace. Before we end this interview, do you have any particular topics or advice that you wanted to give the listeners that we haven't already covered?
That's a good question. I would just say, believe in yourself, and, things that are outside your comfort zone right now, like, if you spend enough time in that place, your comfort zone expands over time. So it's not going to be the case that if you find something terrifying right now, as long as you're kind of incrementally exposing yourself to it and being okay with not being the best at it right now, it'll improve and get better over time, especially if you can find other folks to support you and peers to talk about it, and be on the journey together. So keep at it, and you'll see results.
Great. And how best can people connect with you?
Yeah, for sure. I'm on Twitter, just at Spang, Spang. I also run a monthly webinar video podcast thing for my company called Hang with Spang. If you want to get more content like this, I'm not sure what the best place to find it is. Probably on the Nylas Twitter, twitter.com/Nylas, Nylas. Or we also have a blog at nylas.com/blog. And you should be able to find links to the various events that we're holding. And feel free to, send me a Twitter. I'd love to connect.
Thanks for taking the time to be on the podcast and for, giving all this advice that you've given and all the tips. I found it very insightful, and I'm sure the listeners will also find it very insightful.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been great to be here.